He is called.
Right.
Yeah.
That is so cool. It's pretty cool to have that.
Well, yeah, they're young yet, aren't they?
One's 33.
It's on.
It's on. Okay.
Hi everyone. I would like to invite you to do a couple of things. One is if you're going to read or tell a story about Charlie, there's a sign-up sheet up at the front desk, just by the front door there. And make sure you get your name on there so we get you into the program. And otherwise, find a seat. And I'm really so happy you're all here. I'm Linda Rasmussen. I'm one of Charlie's friends, and he did not ask me to do this event. He asked me to take care of his writing after he passed and his other artifacts. And so I am doing that, but I also really wanted the opportunity to remember Charlie and tell some good stories. I'm sure there's a lot of good Charlie stories in here. And really just pause for a moment. We're all getting older. People pass all the time. I was with Charlie when he passed. He was in Swedish hospital right after Thanksgiving because he'd taken a fall in his home, and it was a big problem. And so after he was released from Swedish, in December he was in a nursing home, and I don't know if any of you had the pleasure of a nursing home, but it was a pretty discouraging experience for him. And so he was in the nursing home from the beginning of December until the 28th of January, when he got up sometime in the wee hours of the morning and took a fall. And when they found him, he wasn't responsive. They called me, met them at the hospital, and it's really clear that he was dying and needed to go. And so they were very kind at Swedish. He was in a hospice room there until he passed. And I'll have to tell you, I was actually relieved for him, because that nursing home experience was so upsetting to him. You all probably know he'd had some physical difficulties for a long time, and he coped with them as best he could. But it's a whole lot different when you're not in your own home. And so I really felt kind of thankful that he got to pass and leave that. And I know he's here tonight. We did bring a little bit of his ashes, so that part of him's here too. But I know his spirit's here. And I really thank you all for coming. And I'm going to get the list, so I'm going to hope that you've all signed up. And then if you didn't sign up and you get inspired sometime during the evening, just let me know, and we can make room. You're going to hear some things, you're going to see some things, and I hope you have a wonderful experience. And there is, of course, plenty to eat. So our first reader is Trudy Mercer.
Charlie would think this is funny that we're clapping it as a memorial. I met Charlie Burks, along with most of you, at Red Sky. And didn't get to know him very well until Bill Shively decided to go to Mexico, and he was putting out a little thing called Sky Views, and he asked me to do Sky Views while he was gone, and he said, go see Charlie, he'll print it for you. So I went to Allied Arts, and there was Charlie with his offset press, and Dick Lilly was there. And we got to talking, and he said, well, writers are artists. He said, why don't you just come hang out? So I started just hanging out at Allied Arts with Charlie Burks and his printing press. So I got to see Charlie work the miracles he did with an old offset. And we all saw some of the work that he did was incredible. Let me put this down. Anyway, after Skyviews, I did a magazine called Red Lines, and Charlie was in all but the very first issue. So I'm going to read some things from Charlie Burks, and some of the introductions are actually better than the rest of it, although it's all good. Not too long ago, I saw Stephen Thomas post on Facebook, and as much as we say bad about Facebook, we have really been able to connect with each other a little more than I think we would have. Anyway, Stephen said something about Vegas Mantra. More sayings from Vegas Mantra, issue number 9 from Red Lines, and I'm going to read you the introduction. The Angel Clare editorial staff filed this report from the Slow Leak Bar and Grill in Langley, Virginia. Vegas Mantra, the semi-legendary, semi-conscious American poet, continues to be mopped up by his semi-international following. Remembered for his Scotch and bariums with the Sponge Chaser, his resemblance to photos of Poe on an overinflated souvenir balloons, and his plausibly chronic inability to complete even the first stanza of his generationally anticipated first poem, Liking Donna, Vegas Mantra continues to build his reputation on the incisively wasted statements which accompany his blind search for aspirin. In D.C., for Iran-Contra, the new improved Last Supper, we tripped over Comrade Mantra when we followed ABC into the Senate can. No, the Senate Council is not the Hawaiian Vibist, nor do we recall why John Niels Jr., before putting a question simultaneously arches his eyebrows and burps. We found Mantra nodding over the midnight headline, Psychic says to Mussolini, told Casey, I dictated to Fawn in a previous life. Rather like the hearings themselves, Mantra's remarks appear to be answers to questions, but aren't. Ladies and gentlemen and lawyers, Vegas Mantra. Sayings of Vegas Mantra. Decay is a test of character. Ruin is a proof of design. I saw the best minds on my block destroyed in 8th grade. Silas and his son get on 2 trains that collide near Terre Haute. Say it in his book, so even writers are made in his image. A few draft commandments must have got lost in the calf deal. Thou shalt not go nuts. What is love? Somebody knows I'm doing this. I love their silence. Lost love? I once taught oology. You know how they blame dead junkies on Charlie Parker? Somebody's going to catch Jesus and his credit card someday. Okay, so Charlie wrote under pseudonyms a lot, obviously. Angel Clare's advice to the arts learn. Dear Angel, when I see work by gifted artists and performers, they strike me as sincere, committed, sensitive individuals. But when I talk to them afterwards, after they stop saying, that's sweet of you, and I just love her work, so many of them turn out to be sarcastic, cold-eyed, and dismissive. You mean you like that piece of shit? Behavior like this confuses me. What can I do? Signed, Once Snubbed by Mr. Rogers. Dear Once Snubbed, John Lennon complained that the Beatles' success meant that local promoters brought quadriplegics backstage, thrust the wheelchairs at the band, and demanded free benefit shows. Since most artists think, deep inside, that they are as good as the Beatles, you shouldn't be surprised. An artist whose work I admire likes to talk with me privately about all his problems. He tells me that I'm one of the few who seem to understand. But in groups, the same artist ridicules me, telling the others that all the problems he complains about in private are my problems. I keep his problems confidential, but when the other artists begin spilling the beer I've bought them on me, I begin to wonder, what can I do? Signed, Understanding. Dear Chump, stop paying for the beer. Just take off your pants. If you don't like it after that, you'll know. Dear Angel, I dreamed that my book came back from the bindery. 3 dozen cases, dream sealed in red, delivered to one of the dream's back rooms. But the dream hides my tools, no scissors, nothing, as bad as unopenable cold pop in a cotton-mouthed dream. Maybe not as bad as peeing helplessly all over a dream party, but just before I wake up, the one copy of my book, each heartfelt altering the color of the embryo cover art, floats near my hidden hand. I conceal it inside my shirt, but you know when you steal something in a dream, you never get out of the dream with it. When I wake up, I haven't even written a book. What can I do? Dear Dream, old Cokie Coleridge wondered, if you dreamed you picked a flower in paradise and woke up with it in your hat, then what? We dreamed a Paul Desmond solo the other night that we'd never heard Paul play, but now it's as much ours as hearing him live 25 years ago. We suggest that instead of trying to steal your book, you sit down in the dream and read it. This is one of my favorites. Dear Angel, nobody went for the stuff I spent years developing under my own name. I never got reviewed, so I never got interviewed, so I never got to explain my ideas, which might have helped people put the pieces together. Plus, I vomited at the inflated rationales more successful artists gave for their work. So I created a hoax artist who parodied the various pretensions of these named talents. But no one who mattered realized it was a hoax. My alter ego's work has become 23 times more influential than my own art ever was. When my new show opened last week, I was treated to the auto voodoo doll effect when the first nighters ridiculed my offering by quoting from my parody character's widely published views. Even worse, I'm running out of gags for my hoax artist. He's repeating himself, becoming a has-been while I'm still a never was. What can I do? Signed, Hoax Writer in the Sky. Dear Hoax, young Mary Godwin won $5 off Byron and Shelley for answering a letter like this. The rest of your problems were basically solved around 1935 by Edgar Bergen. Charlie McCarthy was faster than Bergen's, always made him look like a fool. So the great ventriloquist made Mortimer Snurd, who took Bergen out of the basement and gave his left hand something to do. Bergen died during a 1978 Vegas booking. He survived on stage for over 40 years. Now, while Vegas may not matter, suppose you had the choice between letting your act die or playing some fun hole in 2030. Dear Angel, I wrote a play. In rehearsals, the actors couldn't say the lines as I wrote them. The director, to loosen them up, encouraged the actors to improvise on the situations. When they liked the results, the director advised me to leave the changes in for the good of the show. The play was a success. People keep coming up to me and congratulating me for writing lines that the actors invented. The critics can't wait for my next play. What can I do? Signed, Boy Wonder. B-O-U-Y, Boy Wonder. Dear Boy, brings to mind the old theatrical gag. Did you hear about the actress who was so dumb that she slept with the writer? It could be worse. You might have won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Then everyone would be sure you hadn't written it. Okay, this is a little different. Angel Clare, interviewed by Rex Exposito. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really long, but I caught up with the Angel Clare editorial staff last Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. just as they completed their weekday ritual of watching Knots Landing reruns on Channel 5. A second ongoing project continued, the group's evaluation of the recent rash of unblended scotches. And Arnie Patch, the oldest of the four, at 47, offers me an open bottle with a litho of Jack Stewart shooting skeet on the label. The liquor inside is almost black. Arnie's sister Susan, who dresses like an off-duty public defender, asks my age. Tennelly's in her 20s, a Christy Brinkley blonde razor cut and mortified into the all-black look. Mitch has glowing green hair. He talks tough, but some bartenders still card him before every drink. He could be 16. The bartender shuts off the TV just as Phil Donahue throws guest Don Johnson into a studio audience full of retired stewardesses. The four continue an ongoing argument about Lisa Hartman's wardrobe. I'm going to skip. Arnie, why are we writing advice to the Arts Learn column? The bartender lines up a half dozen more scotches. Holy Lord, for what is called, for Trudy's publication, for Trudy. He thinks he met her in a previous life where they were both trying to explain Stephen Thomas to the Spanish Inquisition. How? Indian to the Mermaid, 1945. Try this, Glenn Hughes. It's a kind of a scotch in the round. Me, taste it. Well, it lacks scenic depth, all right, coughs, chokes. Tenley, yes, everything's right in your lap. Me, I'm sorry, what? Mitch, why don't you two just strip down and screw right here? Then we can go back to your paper and write up how unexpectedly flexible that nasty Angel Claire turned out to be. Tenley, why you fuck constipated goats? Mitch, goats eat anything. Tenley, you would know. Arnie, take a whiff of this Glinda Jackson. Susan, where are the appetizers? The bartender whispers, cue from the wings, kid. These prawns are stuffed with baking soda. You don't want to be drinking this lighter fluid without you eat half a dozen. Me. So do you guys actually get letters and read them and write your answers? Mitch, no. We wait for guys like you to show up. Then we get you drunk. Usually one of us can seduce you into spilling your guts. Just before you throw up, we dump you in a cab. Then we spend the next 3 or 4 days pretending to be you. The first one who can't stand it anymore has to write your letter. Then we ask the bartender what he thinks, and that's usually the basis of our answer. Tenley, not bad, Braindead. Susan, aren't they candid? Try your shrimp in this dip. What happened to that nice drunk with the band? Me, he went to Japan. This is Glen Chikamatsu, non-malted sky. Semi-gradual fade to black with foghorns and gulls crying. And what he usually says at the end is, all letters to Angel Claire become the property of the Angel Claire editorial staff. Letters may be edited or revised or ignored completely. We're not your mother. I have one more I wrote last night. Dear Angel Claire, too many of my old friends are gone. I'm lonely. What can I do? Signed, Arts Lornley. Dear Arts, the Angel Claire editorial board has disbanded and is on vacation in Big Sky Country. They are currently in the middle of a jam session with Don, Bill, and Marion. Open mic to follow. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Before I bring up our next reader, I just want to thank Open Books for letting us use the space tonight. It's just really a fine and perfect location. So thank you very much. Let's have a little applause. Thank you. I've had so much good help from Kim all night. It's like having somebody who knows what I want before I figured it out. So that's great. Our next reader is Jennifer Bird. Also go by Jenny, and we met a number of you here tonight. I met Charlie just a little bit before this time here. Was married to him for 7 years, and I stayed in touch with him off and on throughout the years. And talking to Linda tonight, I remembered that one of the things that had drawn me to him was the way he talked, and the way he talked in metaphor, even talking about everyday kind of things. He would either make a story out of it, or he spoke very poetically just about regular things or just anything. And some people sometimes would think that he was playing with them, and I could see they'd get frustrated with them, but I really liked it. And although when we lived together, there'd be times when he would start getting into something, and it's like, I gotta go to work, I gotta catch the bus or something. So after that, he'd start saying, okay, well, would you like the War and Peace version, or would you like the Reader's Digest version? Either way, he'd still have his same Charlie way of saying things and creating that whole, I think Linda, you said it was like an environment, a whole context for the
the point or the gist of the story he was trying to tell. It was a really wonderful thing. And another, well, he was just one of the most purely artistic souls I've ever known. And he had talent in a number of the arts and also just such a breadth of knowledge. And one of the things I'm just so grateful to him for is, one of the many things is his, how he taught me about jazz music of the 20s, 30s, 40s, through the 60s. And so I was going to read a poem from Gauze Violins that has a small mention of a jazz musician, but it's Mr. Backstage. Mr. Backstage imagines himself to Jerry Mulligan as Chopin, rushes Band-Aids, chicken soup, translates bonbons, photoplay, bed rest. Happy, high, guilty, and ready to fix things if he were once again to get up. Mr. Book ends their postponed discussions with the usual nod. And then I'll read another one from here called Entering Tone. Entering tone, leaving tone, misleading without lying tone, empty sea face beyond fishnet tone, obscured mountain note, silence depicted as rests, no zone void, complete delivery, background in agreement, you here now. What we plan to be found here, maybe no few words. Face in family photo someone sees and says, this is like you. Writing tone, reading tone, what we told them, what they said. Charlie just had a wonderful, wonderful musical ear in his poetry and incredible language. And on the blurb on the back, the last sentence says, Burks suggests that we are always instruments, in tune or out, unfinished, played well or badly, even worn thin or broken, conduits for a song to outreach and outlast us. And I think his work does that. He used to talk about, after he was gone, maybe the insect lab assistant of the future would unearth his poetry. The graduate lab assistant, he called it the insect because he figured the insects would outlive humanity. So insect lab assistant, graduate student of the future would hopefully find his poetry. So, thank you, Bud.
Thank you, Jenny. One of the people who's instrumental in getting you here tonight is Phoebe Bosche, and I can't thank her enough for that. And she is our next reader.
Agreed.
I wish Charlie was here to write about the Trump administration. It would be pretty interesting.
You'd have a lot of fun with that.
I don't see how anybody could, but he probably could. I'm reading a piece by Charlie in Nobody's Orphan Child, or I actually think I just was reading it all today. It's really a wonderful compilation that Paul Hunter actually edited. It was put together in 1996, Red Sky Poetry Theater, but Paul had told everyone, give me a poem. Maybe it's an orphan, nobody ever published it, maybe it was published, but it's your favorite poem and write about it and read, we'll put it in here and then write something about it. And I like this one by Charlie. How? What? Can it end in heroic rags, house and plants, lord of morning, famous music, hands your damp and hair, whispers, rages, wild light? Is it so possible, like Peru and pianos, a night stitch and no whiskey? Can we hear each other to last pieces, disembody, climb or carry the complaint, the losses, incense, faces, hats without perfume, to cling to bones of the coat around your breath? Can you forgive enough? Am I and what and then sides form, scream doors, take birds across the page to isn't it? In sinking skies, think of what was done with you and me, this indigo with cloudy thorns about our heads. Charlie.
So Bob, Bert, did you want to come up and talk about Charlie?
No, I guess not.
Okay.
Yeah.
John Marshall.
My wife and I opened this bookstore in '95 and had the great pleasure of hosting Charlie a couple times and having seen him other times. He was one of the best writers. Reading. I loved how he read, and it almost seems unjust to try to do it, especially with him over the shoulder, but oh well. I've got 3 books. I'm going to do one piece from each. Central America is pretty dark. One of the things I totally admired about Charlie, and one of the difficulties for Charlie, was that he could experience darkness. So the beginning, the opening piece to this. Then she is put to the crumbling wall and shot. The clothing creased, the bodies dream like a laundry bag stuffed with bloody rags. A man peels back the hair at her temple to make the final wound. Then that dead thud faded. A cough, or someone saying, "Thank you for a cigarette." Once when Charlie read here, he read a line, and I've heard countless lines here, and only 2 have ever stuck in my mind without even seeing them on a page, and here's one of them. It's in this poem. I'll let you decide which one it is. Giant. Love is a giant invitation to a small party. Love is a jack-in-the-box where, when the weasel pops, you've got to lift the lid yourself. Love is shame without the mess of guilt. Love is silence blotted up, deciding what to say next. Love is when 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name and 2 of them can't stay. Here comes the line. Love is cathedral doors on a walnut. Love is young because you're old, loud where you are quiet, black when you're white, cold if you're coming apart, and blind the day you buy that new TV. Love is reasonable doubt induced by a single confession. And the last from Gauze, violins, etc. Paul's wonderful production. And I think it is the last, no it isn't the last, song. And to what Jennifer said about Charlie's music in his speech, much less in his poetry, really is alive here, because you're going to hear a hell of a lot of full rhymes. Song. The costumes are a mismatched pair. Our smiles invite a searching stare. Our drifting feet invent a park that isn't safe till after dark. Piano music turns the page, and then we lightly disengage. Our voices slip insensibly, the love of you avoiding me. My small chateau, your summer stance, the moments in the alley dance. The dreaming phrases of the chase, my poetry, your portrait face. the time for love in everyone, our skin insistent as the sun. And then we safely disengage. The photograph creates an age. I try to understand in this the introduction to the kiss. My promises, your misty parts, the birds of spring as swift as darts. My soft advance, your slip away, the words we never meant to say, the damp clothes hanging on the line, your melody, this life of mine.
In the late 90s, Charlie joined my household along with my wife, Kay, and it was a really interesting experience. He was actually a very gentle and polite roommate, and he had some quirks that I just loved. The most memorable was we had a mild earthquake, but we were up on a third level of an old wood frame building, and the building started to sway, and so Kay and I are trying to get, like under a door frame or whatever the recommended thing was at the time, and Charlie is like running through the apartment. It's a very long apartment. It's like running through the apartment towards the living room, and we're like, Charlie, come back, there's all this stuff swinging overhead, and he says, it's on TV. Of course, it's already an event on TV. So that really endeared him to me, because here I am all thinking about an earthquake, and he's thinking about the media event. So the next thing we're going to do is have another set of video excerpts that have been provided to us courtesy of Tom Price. So Tom, I'm going to let you tell us what you're showing here.
Okay. Well, what a treat that was. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for putting that together. Charlie was he was like a pretty courageous guy. Long, like he had his doctorate in like jazz and 50s comedians, and long after he was forced to retire from academia. And he was living in disguise in Jefferson Terrace apartment. We would have these long conversations a number of times a year. It would always start on February 6th because we have the same birthday, along with Ronald Reagan. So we would always sort of renew our vows together, talking. And then we'd have these other conversations that would sort of go into summer, then we'd fall out of touch, and then we renew it again. And he would always the conversation would be long, and he would be telling me stuff. He would be telling me a lot of stuff, and then we'd have sword fights over the phone, and then it would be, that would be it until the next February 6th. Anyway, this is also from Central America. It's called Justice. The one who was first, the spokesman, no longer pointed his gun at us, since 7 other gunmen who said nothing filed in while he spoke. He began smiling, "We're not here to hurt you." I did not like to look at their guns, so my next memory of the revolution is the way our marimba player put down his sticks, the left stick into the right hand with the right, then both down. And biting a fingernail on his left hand, he glanced at me, then away, the rasp of his eyes bright white. Another of them came in, no gun, and began talking behind dark glasses. He began describing us, all of us, each of us, to ourselves. The others with the guns did not appear to listen, but we listened. He was the spokesman, their poet, their lawyer with his people versus verses. He began to announce the charges against us. He knew our music, quoted our blindfold tests, gripped us with our guilt as he exhumed our invisible past. He used no notes, spoke it all as simply as today's date, and so deftly built this tight little case for our deaths that, like our tenor player told him, it was rhythmically very hip. These were among our errors. That we made anti-revolutionary music while attempting to corrupt the people into glorifying us to our material gain. That we perpetuated vague, nebulous, emotional states, that we weakened the defenses of the people through an incorrect reliance upon beauty. That in marketing our sterile theories, stratagems, and diuretic impromptus, we had ceased to listen to the people, who at all times make precise and clear what music it is they need to hear. And finally, death to all traitors, death to all provocateurs, death to all parasites, death to all tools, death to, and at this point, the others with guns began contributing their own various deaths to this and that. But when Pete joined in on the maracas, they stopped suddenly. I thought they would kill us then. It was a total unilateral type thing for a beat. If I had known what I should be, how I should sound, what I should confess to, how I could turn in or on, how by making some kind of noise to not die at this moment. But it was an exercise. The whole affair. The guy in the dark glasses had all our records from college. The gunmen began shaking our hands and borrowing our cigarettes and phoning their friends. Naturally, we agreed to play a dance for them for free, and for expiation of our crimes, and for the good of our souls, and for the revolution.
Our next reader is Paul Hunter.
Charlie Burks' material speaks to the ages, but it was peculiar, like he could give you a monologue about what that screw hole touched in the video. Who got shot in the video?
On your right.
I have two little stories to tell. One of them might give you a measure of Charlie's sort of operation in the world. I took him to Denver with me to visit the Parsons in the late 90s and mid-90s, early 90s. Anyway, he hadn't seen Tom and Patty in a little while, and he was up for it, but he didn't fly. I don't know that he'd ever flown before that, and he was terrified. And the monologue that he poured into my ear for the whole flight. Well, I'm going to get even with him. I'll tell you a little story. We went to see the grave of Buffalo Bill Cody. It's up on the mountain overlooking Golden, Colorado. And we drove over there, and we were wandering for many hours, Tom and Charlie and I, and got up higher and higher and higher. As we got higher and higher, the sky got darker and darker and darker, and it looked like it was going to storm. And Tom is a nice guy. He just is gauging the nervousness of, and of course, I'm going for John, because I know something about Buffalo Bill Cody. And when they start to get to the point where they want to turn around, I kind of turn it up. I throw them some meat. You know, there's a Cody, Wyoming, and a Cody, Nebraska, and he had 3 states fighting over his body after his death. And as we drove up to this high point, there's a kind of torture chamber as a bed, if you can imagine. It's the kind of grave site where there's it's surrounded by a heavy wrought iron fence with pointed kind of arcs coming in, so that if you ever got inside, you wouldn't be able to climb back out without impaling yourself, and you couldn't get inside because you didn't impale on the way in. So mountain lions couldn't steal the body, and you know, if goats were tossed in, they wouldn't be able to get out. Anyway, it was an interesting situation for body stealers. And so Charlie and I riffed about this a little while as it got blacker and blacker, and all of a sudden the lightning starts hitting the mountains around us. And it's, you know, it's that blue-black. And this one I pulled out I said, Charlie, you know what Buffalo Bill's Cody's funeral was like? And this is a warning to you, Charlie. It rained like hell at his funeral. It rained endlessly and like hell, buckets and buckets at his funeral. And one of the best kept secrets on the planet, according to Buffalo Bill, was his extramarital life. And there, as the last words were being said over the body, there were 4 women in a row holding huge black umbrellas, trying to keep the coffin dry. His wife, and his ex-wife, and his ex-wife, and his ex-wife. I said, Charlie, nobody ever forgets. Anyway, it was one of those times where he became quiet. Became quiet for, you know, hours after that. The ride back, the whole thing, it was amazing. And then the other thing I want to tell you has to do with, I approached Charlie and said, I'd like to do a book of yours. And we never had the conversation about Charles Bukowski and his editors and the way Charles Bukowski's legend has grown and flourished. You probably, if you don't know it, you should. But Charlie said, okay. I said, well, you know, why don't you give me see what you got and put something together and give me a... Well, you know what he did? Somewhere in his stuff, there is a small blue suitcase. It's this big and this thick. At that time, it had the collected works of Charlie Burks. The lock still locked. The suitcase was packed. He didn't give me a manuscript. He gave me the little blue suitcase. I said, what am I supposed to do with this? He says, you're going to print what you like, I bet. You're going to print what you like. Well, let's just see. And so it was this toss something right at me. When I gave him that suitcase back, right before we went into production here, this is handmade production on a little tabletop press. Handmade, letterpress, carved wood, all that stuff. I gave Charlie 5 little books that I put covers on, and I put names on. I said, this is what I found in your books, in your box, and I laid them out. I said, this is the first one. This is the second one. This is the... I went like that. They weren't it wasn't that any of the later ones were better than the earlier ones, but you needed to know stuff about Charlie. This book is what you needed to know to start to know Charlie. This was the starting point book. He named it, but he didn't do anything else except write all the pieces. And the pieces come from, you heard him. He was snatching from here and there and everywhere, a grand juggler. And somewhere that little blue suitcase, I figured it might have been an excuse for a fire. I don't know. I don't know. But it was a sobering thing. And I gave it back to him with all the stuff in it. I said, this is all I can do. This is all I can do. I printed one, and he gave it a title. I gave him kind of funny titles, just so that there wouldn't be real titles, so that he could tell that they were different from each other. But I honor him as one of the greats. Thanks.
I actually haven't been in the storage unit yet, so maybe the blue suitcase is in there. Well, our next reader's first name is Charlie, and I'm not visually connected enough to the printing to know.
That's me.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Please come up, Charlie, and share your proper last name with people.
Yeah, I've had terrible handwriting since I was a child.
Terrible eyesight.
Yeah, there's that. I'm Charlie Cunniff.
Oh, yeah.
I was introduced to the Red Sky crowd first with Elliott. I moved in with Elliott and Gita in about 1980, 81, something like that. Was it 80? Yeah. No, not 83. I moved out in 83.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was this marvelously wonderful experience of my life, moving in with Elliott and Gita and Joanne. It was just a spectacular time. That really, I moved to Seattle in '79, and it allowed me to meet so many people. And I was introduced to everybody, including Bill Shively, who was Joanne's boyfriend at the time and lived around the corner on University Ave. And Bill invited me to come to the Red Sky group, and I said, "Oh, I'm not a poet." He said, "You don't need to be a poet. You're a photographer, so come with us and play with us." And so that's how I met everybody. That's how I met the whole Red Sky crowd. I was on the sideline. I don't ever read. I had a few of my photographs in the open sky, and I met my wife at Joe Kepler's famous Slated for Demolition event at what was the Andor studio. It was no longer Andor, and it was just this marvelous event there, and I met this girl, and 4 years later, we got married. And this August we'll be married 30 years. So that's how Red Sky affected me. And I remember Charlie. I didn't know him very well, but Charlie was he was brilliant. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the Red Sky people were really smart, but guys like but Charlie had this brilliance about him that like I said, I didn't really know him. On the other hand, he sort of was like the Tony Clifton sort of character as well. So he was, you could see a couple different sides to him. I didn't really know him very well, but I admired him. I admired his touch. And so looking through this little book, I picked out a couple. This one's called The Poet. The poet who survives himself must have to learn to write again. The bottle's empty clank outlines the room. Dead friends have eaten all the fame. The pretty witches have been burned. Now is like a music when its audience has gone. Silence tends to each sensation, as the grip of a violin. Hurt precedes attractive noise. Words are heard before they're said, and all the while he stands as still as if he could have been. Oh, and all the while he stands as still as if he could be seen. This one's called Long Before. Long before the end, an end is near. Many the good child inhaled by the floor. Each secret is described as like a door. Each truth presumes all other ere its ear.
So our next presenter is Jesse Minkert, and he has an audio experience for us. But Jesse, do you want to tell us about it first?
Yes, please. I'm learning a lot about Charlie Burks tonight. Things that I came in a little too late to know about. I have stories of my own, but I'm not going to tell any of them. But I will talk about the audio CD that he and I produced together, and the chapbook that went with it called Since the Ace, which is, of course, his title. And it's not just a collection of his work. There are some guest artists that appear. It's all his work, and it's almost all his voice. But there are others on there too. I'm on it. Paul Hunter's on it. Julian Priester is on it. A soprano named Tomasa Eckert is on it. And another guy named Stephen Thomas is on it. And I tried to pick a selection that goes on for 5 or 6 minutes without me having to run back and forth to pick and choose. And beyond this point, I think we should just play it.
Yeah.
Just a couple of extra notes on that. The poem Giant is in this book. And on the cover is my hand holding a walnut on which are cathedral doors.
I love it. All right.
One note, I have brought with me every copy of this chapbook and CD together that I have, and they are yours. I'm serious. They are yours if you want them. So you can take them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Was there anyone else who wanted to speak? Come on forward.
Pardon me, excuse me.
I don't have that. Okay, good. And see, there's a CD or
All with CDs.
I'm Dan O'Keefe. Miles Davis told Paul Schaefer, gave Paul Schaefer some musical advice that is very profound and I love. And I'm not going to do it in Miles's voice, although Paul did. And what he said was, never play the root. Never play the root. And the reason that strikes me now is 40 years ago, Charlie invited me and Gary Curtis over to his house one night. and for the express purpose of more or less giving me that same advice. But seeing as I was with Charlie, it took a couple hours. But it was fascinating. I never, I knew Charlie for over, I knew him my entire adult life off and on. I never spent a moment with him that I didn't thoroughly enjoy. What he said, I can't put it together now 40 years later, but basically what he said is he says, what we have to work with are funhouse mirrors and prisms. And the art is how we play with this mirror and these prisms. At the time, and the reason he gave it to me at the time was that I'm not a poet, I'm a fiction writer, and I just barely knew, I knew how to write a story. I was turning out stories, I was talented. But for me, I was just thrilled that there were stories, they had characters, they had movement, they had, much less looking at it from that perspective. But as the years passed, that became the core of my own artistic expression. And now, 40 years later, I still get up at 4 in the morning. Trudy knows this. I get up at 4 in the morning and write for 2 hours every day. Because that game, that play, I find utterly fascinating. I find it more fascinating than anything in my life. I mean, Trudy's my life, but I mean, in terms of my artistic life, it is at its core. And Charlie gave me that. Charlie was at his core a performer. At his core, and when I say that, I mean how James Cagney defined the art of acting. He said, how to act is you stand firm on 2 feet, you look your co-actor full in the eye, and you tell the truth. Anybody who knew Charlie at all knew that the game he played, that in fact was his life, in fact was his output, in fact was everything about Charlie, was, how do I finish this? There are 2 things I know about Charlie in the end. 1, he never lied. And 2, he never played the art. Thank you.
We couldn't hear the last line.
Never played to the room, is that what you said?
Never played the root.
But never played.
Never played the root.
The root.
R-O-O-T?
Is there anyone else who wants to read or tell a Charlie story? And it doesn't matter. If you already have it, you have another story, it's fine. This is just to remember.
I want to. I'll be the first on the list. Charlie loved the Indianapolis 500.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
And having grown up in Indiana, not all that far from Speedway, I was like, whoa. So I got invited to come over and watch the race with him. He had a board with the list of all the drivers, all the cars, their trial times, where they were on the post and everything. And through the race, he moved little marks so that he knew who was where in the race and what their speed was, what their position was, all this. And in the 500 is not like a little short race. I mean, this is a whole afternoon thing. Really, anyway. And it was a part of Charlie I hadn't seen before. I'd heard him talk a little bit about the Indy 500 and be really excited about it. But this was like a kid in a candy store. He was in love with that race. And it's just a really fond memory of that afternoon that I got to spend with him and watch, because I didn't even own a television, so you know, it was something I got to share with him. I grew up when I was in high school. It was a rite of passage to just cut class and go to the time trials. So you came in with a sick note, but you were sunburned, and everybody knew. So I just want to thank Charlie for that experience with him. That was so different from everything else with the writing, with the readings, with all of the work that we all did together. That was so outside of that gave me a glimmer of another part of him, and so I wanted to share that.
Coming up this weekend.
What's that?
It's this weekend.
It's
Yeah, oh yeah, Memorial Day. Are you kidding?
Memorial Day, yeah, right.
Thanks for that.
So let's, Phoebe, are you still here?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted you to have the opportunity to tell people, if you wanted to, about some possibilities for some other Charlie-themed events.
Well, we're not sure. We
Yeah.
want to do one. We were Scott and I did. Our friend owns the Hopvine and the Fiddler and a couple other places, and we wanted to do, because 5-0 was, you know, what. We hope to maybe do it there, but the guy who owns it, they aren't doing much poetry stuff on Capitol Hill anymore, but different kind of people have moved in. So Vermilion is a gallery there that does a lot of performance stuff, and so we may do something there a little later.
Where should people keep looking at the Raven Chronicles?
So we'll have it online somewhere. Yeah,
Facebook?
everybody, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Facebook, yeah. And also, one thing interesting, I don't know how this guy got in touch with me. I guess I said something on Facebook. I don't know how that came about. But anyway, a friend of his since grade school, he went to Queen Anne High with him, has written our last issue, our last regular issue of Raven Chronicles is going to be out in July, and since 1991 publishing. So it's going to be like 400 or 500 pages. But this guy has written a remembrance of knowing him in high school and being at his house. He lived in a big old house, Charlie with his dad, on Queen Anne. And this guy went to Haight-Ashbury with Charlie, and he writes about the adventures of them together. And this guy was in a rock band, so it's kind of interesting. So that'll be in this last issue. And Stephen Thomas sent me 2-page poem about a skeleton walking into a bar in dedication to Charlie, and that'll be in there too.
Thank you.
Yeah, the writer, friend of Charlie's that Phoebe was referring to is Jeff, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his last name right, LaBrèche.
Oh, that's right, Jeff LaBrèche, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was very sad he couldn't be here, but he is
Yeah.
a parent of a child that he had to.
He's
Do
not a
some
writer,
records.
he's an antique collector who goes to China, but
He and Charlie really
Yeah,
connected over
they
music.
did, yes.
Yeah, they were in a band together.
Yeah.
We actually found a CD in Charlie's CD collection of their band.
Oh.
There's all kinds of things to keep discovering. Anyone else want to speak? Thank you so much for being here. There's food and drink in the back. Please enjoy each other's company. I heard someone say to someone else, I'm so glad you're still alive. And really, you know, at this point in life, I feel that way. It's like, I'm so glad you're still here. So, and I'm glad you all came tonight. And I know that, you know, regardless of your beliefs, that Charlie's spirit is free, and he is probably just kind of standing over there like this, just kind of giving the nod and like, yeah, you know, he's cheering us on. So.
Oh, he's critical.
Not cheering, not cheering.
Yeah.
He'll tell you about that later. Okay, so if we could have the lights up, we can all start enjoying each other's company some more. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.